Testing. Mic check. Mic check. Testing, testing. Alright. Alright, so testing out the stream for today. Are you able to hear me? This is kind of a testing run. Gonna give it a few minutes to see if people can confirm. Audio sounds okay, video looks okay. Alright. Can anyone confirm? Give me a heads up if the volume sounds okay. Maybe not. Okay, let's see here. Testing. With echo. Uh-oh.
Testing, testing. Testing, any more echo? Okay. No more echo? Okay, great. All right, everyone. Well, we didn't do a very good job of advertising this, so hopefully you'll get to see something today that you find interesting. I wanted to kind of demonstrate the purpose of Beautify Zero and what it would look like to start to build a new application with the intent of having a framework core to help manage components and different features and functionalities. So today is going to be a straight brand new installation of Vite or Vite. Okay, we'll hook up TypeScript router Pina and ESLint. Not going to mess with AuxLint. I'm going to create a basic view application. Okay, so Beautify Zero, and you can check out the documentation at zero.beautifyjs.com. For those who do not already know, Beautify Zero is a meta framework for Vue with the express intent of creating a reusable framework core. The idea is the functionality that we have gotten to after a decade of iterating on Beautify is pretty similar since the beginning. And these concepts that we've used over the years can be broken down, have been broken down into reusable composables, publicly available composables. The idea is Beautify will eventually start being refactored to utilize Beautify Zero at its core. And what this means is we're making a concerted effort to abstract functionality out of Beautify to reduce its scope of responsibility, and having the baseline, its core, effectively, to be handled in a separate repository, to be handled in a separate way, a different way. And the idea is that these composables, we will build upon them to reach feature parity with Beautify, in Beautify, but at the base level, we're trying to have the minimal amount of functionality necessary to accomplish the goal. And the goal is, I have a new application, or I have an application that I'm working on. I have a set of requirements that are defined, and I need to create a base so that the components that I'm building that can be reused are based on a tried and true foundation. The concepts that we utilize in Beautify, like I said, we've been using in one way or another since version 1, have remained relatively the same. This pattern is what I call a registry pattern. There's probably a actual computer science technical term for it, but for us, since the beginning, we've had some form of registration component, or composable, excuse me. And the idea is let's take a radio group, for example. So in a radio group, you have three. Let's just say you have three. Let's just say you have three radio inputs, and then you have a model that corresponds to those inputs. Well, that model is the single source of truth. The single source of truth for the radio inputs selection state, and this is basically the foundation for everything in Beautify. We have a collection of anything. It could be components. It could be objects. It could be. Doesn't really matter what it is, but we have a collection. In Beautify 0, I call them tickets. In Beautify 0, I call them tickets. These are registered with a single source of truth. A single source of truth communicate state and information. These are in the composables you can see. We have a lot of foundational pieces. But what I'm going to focus on today. Are the plugins. Oh, there's still an echo. There's still an echo. I didn't do anything. Let me see. Alright. Audio input. I wonder if it's because it's trying to. I'm gonna. Echo again. Right, I'm gonna close Discord.
All right, I'm testing with
a
different input microphone. And let's see if this makes any difference. I've got a couple things that I can tweak. My OBS installation was nuked from a all right, I'm going to remove and re-add the audio. Hold on. Testing. What about
this?
But now they sound different. Okay.
All right, let's try this. Any better? Does the sound appear any better, or are we still getting a loop? Interesting. Let's see. is for this, what my microphone is for this headset, but that's quite annoying. That's quite annoying. I wonder why it's doing this. I wonder why it's doing this. I appreciate everyone's patience. I'm sure this is quite annoying. Trying to think. Good morning. Good morning. I'm actually not sure. What to do here. I can't find. I don't have another mic to hook up. I don't have another mic to hook up. All right. Well, I can try to stop and restart the stream. I'm not sure how much of a delay there is. Do you have multiple audio? No, I only have. Now I'm muted. Okay, what about now? Yeah. Is that better? Sounds back, no loop. All right, cool. Well, thank you for enduring that. So, back to what I was talking about. Today I'm going to focus on the plugins, and essentially these are a combination of multiple composables to accomplish a specific goal. The foundation of these composables is comprised of various foundation, registration, and selection composables combined together to create a specific feature, all conditional based upon whether or not you use it. So you can use one or more, it doesn't matter which ones you use. Today, I'll try to make use of the most ones that I can. I've created a brand new, fresh Vite installation. I'm going to install Vuetify 0. In this particular instance, I'm using PNPM. So I'm going to install Vuetify 0, and then I'm going to install Uno CSS. You could use any foundational CSS library that you want. I'm choosing Uno CSS because it's I think this one of the simplest to install and get set up, and it's also what we use for the Vuetify 0 documentation. Alright, install Uno CSS, do some configuration. And as I'm getting this set up, the idea for Vuetify 0 is that it's the baseline for an unstyled approach to Vuetify. There is no CSS by default in anything except for plugins that generate it, like theme. And I'll talk about this in a little bit, but in addition to that, the CSS or anything that is generated by plugins in most cases has an adapter, which means you can, in a similar fashion in Vuetify, whereas we have a date composable, and that date composable you can have our default adapter, or you could choose Luxon, you could choose Moment, Day.js. These are all possible. And I figured that the best thing to do for a system going forward would be to approach it in the same way we do Vuetify. Give a foundational base that works out of the box, but the extensibility to customize or use it in a different way unintended by the original design. Alright, we're going to do config, and I need to double check, but let me pull this up here. Okay, cool. So we're going to import the define config. We're going to and we're also going to use the preset Win3. Again, the idea is once this is fully on the market, Tailwind, Uno CSS. I'm not really sure if there's any other super popular CSS based utility frameworks, but the idea is that Vuetify 0 will just work with any one of them, so that you can have you can use whatever designs, you can use whatever underlying CSS utility classes that you want. Unlike whereas Vuetify right now, we kind of have a bundle of some utility classes, obviously not as much as in modern offering like Tailwind, but we're trying to move in a way that you can simply just use something off the shelf to generate these utility classes. Okay, and I'll come back to this in a little bit once we install our theme plugin. And let's see if we can. Oh, I need to go into the. So Vuetify.js. I'll pull up an image to help kind of explain it a little bit, but ideally Vuetify 0 is the core functionality of Vuetify for building the framework. The framework is themes for generating colors, localization for generating strings, breakpoints, hydration. We've added a couple new ones to accommodate some other functionality that exists in Vuetify, but ideally the point is for Vuetify will take the plugins created in Vuetify 0, augment them however it needs to obtain feature parity with its current functionality. Things like being able to have multiple. A good example for themes would be being able to have multiple root nodes generated in CSS for the theme. The idea is this is the baseline that can be built upon, so we're trying to keep the functionality as minimum as possible just to accomplish a specific goal. Alright. My network is having fun issues today. It's nuts. It's like getting hung up. There we go. Alright, so we now have our brand new Vite application. The only thing that we have done beyond setting up Pina and View Router was adding Vuetify 0 and adding Uno CSS for our CSS class generation. So just like with Vuetify, we suggest putting your configuration file inside of a plugins folder. This is a pattern that we utilize in all of our properties, and it's just a convenient way for to abstract functionality. And what we're going to do is we're going to well, first we're going to create kind of a wrapper for generating our code for bootstrapping with Vue. And what that kind of looks like is we'll have a register plugins function that will accept an app from Vue, and then we will use that to hook up various features. Now, this by default out the gate, it looks like, yeah, so router stores. Okay, so coming into my main, I'll bring in my register plugins, so that will generate, and then figured it out. There we go. Alright, so now we've got our baseline so that we can put any plugins that we want to register from our main folder in here. This is just a pattern that I kind of follow typically. And all we're really going to see here is we're going to import from 0, and then we'll use that here. And then coming into the actual configuration for Vuetify 0, we'll just start by exporting a default function that accepts an app argument. Alright, so now we can actually start doing something. Now the idea is we are going to have, in the similar fashion to Vuetify create, you can create a new Vuetify application. We're going to have the same DX tooling to allow you to create a new Vuetify 0 application. It'll start out as just kind of a demo to showcase everything that you can kind of use, and then in the future it'll turn into an interactive installation process similar to Vite, where you can choose the features that you would like to have it bootstrapped with, and then get an application that's pretty much ready to go off the start. So let's begin with our theme plugin. Now this is very similar to what you see in Vuetify. We're going to have a set of options that we can configure. Now, out of the box, there are no themes in the theme plugin. It's completely bare. So you have to designate what your colors are, you have to designate what your theme names are, and you have to designate the defaults to be used. So starting out, we'll do themes, and we'll do a light theme. Pick our colors. This is a very similar structure to Vuetify. We'll do a primary color, we'll do a secondary color. Got some of these off to the side here to make it easy to paste. And we'll designate our on color, so we'll say on primary is going to be white, and on secondary will be white. Alright. We'll mark this as this theme is not a dark theme, and then we will set the default of our system to light and save. So now if I open up my console here, look at the head, you'll see, and this is the same thing that we have in Beautify, we generate a style ID that contains the values that we've just defined here inside of the DOM. Now let's say I want to add a new theme. We'll do a dark theme. And save that, and as it's regenerated we can open up our style sheet, and now we can see, okay, now we have both themes here. This can be as large or as small as you want it to be. You get to define all of those variables in terms of what actual colors are generated for your application. Now, one of the cool things that we've added into the baseline of themes now is the concept of palettes, or palette. Did I spell it wrong? There we go. Okay. Now, one thing that's cool here that you'll notice, spend a lot of time on TypeScript types and DX experience. So when you're working with Beautify 0, everything that you see should have proper documentation that your IDE should just pick up, to have information regarding, you know, how do you use this, what's a basic way to get off the ground, what does it look like, and then same thing for the individual parts, information regarding what the properties do. And in this particular instance we have a new feature for being able to designate a palette. So what does that look like? Well, I'm going to grab from our playground. I've got this palettes file that I'm going to save in here, and this is just a collection of colors. So there's material palette and all the different reds, you know, gray, blue, gray, etc. And this is a tailwind palette, just a list of all of the colors in these particular, I'll just say for lack of a better word, design systems. So you can plug any set of colors in here, it doesn't really matter. These are going to be added to a token registry that you can actually reference and utilize in your themes. Okay, so what does that look like? Alright, well, we'll go ahead and we will import, let's see, it's material palette, okay, and tailwind palette. Okay, so now when I save these, now if I want to access colors from one of these, all I need to do is, using a bracket syntax wrapping around and designating the color that I want. So let's say I want to do purple 500. I can do, because I've named this MD, you can name it whatever you want. So MD dot purple dot 500. And now if I come over here and look at my generated style sheet, of course it'll say undefined. That's not supposed to happen. So let's see what I'm missing really quick. palette theme. Yeah, yep. Oh, that's right. We did make one small change. So because you can reference, you can self-reference colors from a theme inside of itself or other themes. You have to prefix, so we're saying go to the palettes, MD purple 500. And now I'm going to open this up. Now it should work just fine. Okay, so there we go. Purple 500, 9C27B0, same as here. And you can do this with any theme or any palette. So if you want to reuse, I can say light dot on primary, it should be, and that will generate, or maybe it's light dot colors. So this is a live demo in every stretch of the word, or every sense of the word. Okay, there we go. So if you want to reuse colors from that you are designating other themes, or you want to specifically reference a value that you've initialized in your palette, or you want to do a regular default, just string value, this will take it all, generate it, and put it in the DOM. Some other things that we've added is the ability to make these themes lazy, so that we're not loading them or generating at runtime unless we absolutely need to. So if you have 5 or 10 themes, you can make everything lazy and then only load what the user is currently using, or the developer is currently using. So now that we have these colors, now comes the next part, and this is where Uno CSS comes into play. Now, if I just wanted to create some classes off of these, I could do that. I could say background color is var v0 primary. And then I can designate on primary and you can see here I've now taken one plugin, defined my colors either based off of palette, self-referencing or referencing other themes, or just plain values. This gets configured, registered with the internal registry, and creates a what's called a token registry, so that you can easily access all these values. And then we, using the adapter, the default adapter, generates and puts these into the DOM. We are using lazy so that if we don't have a theme that's being actively used by the user, it doesn't generate. For the sake of this, though, I'm going to turn it back on. And okay, so now we've got our colors defined here, and because we're doing this based off of semantic language of primary, secondary, tertiary, whatever, when we change themes, this will just work automatically out of the box. Okay, so from here, you would start to be able to utilize Uno CSS classes to modify and tailor your design and however you're going to use it. However, the color management is handled by the theme plugin. So the next step to this, let's say I want to make this a little bit easier. I don't want to have to write all of these classes. So instead of doing that, we're going to go to the Uno CSS config, and we're going to, there is a config option to be able to define theme colors, and we're just going to put ours in here. So we got primary, secondary, and then we've got on primary, and on secondary. Now, it's probably a different thing. It's probably text. Text on, there you go. Sorry. Okay, so now utilizing the Uno config, we can say, hey, I want to have my theme colors generated based off of these variables. And these are the variables that are generated at runtime, also works in SSR, and injected into the DOM. Now, one of the other things that is pretty cool about this is we now have flexibility to designate targets for the theme container. So by default, it's going to go to your root application, whatever theme you have currently active. It'll be added to the root application, but we could technically go in it and say, let's say ID foobar, and then I can come over here to my config and I can say target foobar. And interesting. I wonder if, so this might be a bug. Let me try main. Okay. Alright, I'll have to look into this. That's a new feature. Not working. No problem. Moving on. Okay, so now we've got our two different themes. How do we modify them? How do we work with them? Okay, so everything in Vuetify 0 is based off a registration system in that, so whatever properties you use to look up or access the registry will be the same throughout pretty much all plugins. So let's do, first let's import use theme. Alright, and this right here is going to be our theme context. This is the all registries are built off of JavaScript map with some added functionality to support all of the use cases that we currently have in Vuetify. The idea is, again, we want to be able to have a nice clean changeover from the currently built functionality in Vuetify to building the Vuetify components on top of Vuetify 0 as a foundation. And I won't go into too much of collections, but everything that you see here is relatively the same across all plugin composables or anything that uses a registry. You'll have a couple of methods which are resemblant that you would get off of JavaScript map, entries, keys, values. These are all cached for performance, so that if you are accessing these values a lot, you're not constantly, running the map entries function. And then we have a couple of public functions. Specifically, I'm going to use cycle. New in version 3.10 of Vuetify, I believe it was, that we added some new theme functions to make it easier to configure and change your theme. So let's start out with, because this is a registry, I can actually, and cool, you see we're getting this pop-up right here, I can actually reference the individual tickets by calling for them in the registry. So let me go ahead and get dark. And what you're seeing here, this is a ticket for that registration. So to try to imagine what's going on here, say you go to attend some sort of get-together and there's a raffle, okay, and you show up at the front desk, you register, you say, hey, I'm here, and they give you a raffle ticket. And then that ticket is what gives you a connection to that event. It's the same thing with the processes in Vuetify 0, which is the same thing as processes in Vuetify itself. We have a base event, or a main place where we go to register, and then we receive some sort of ticket that gives us access to perform things based in that context. So here, this is what a standard theme item looks like. We have a couple values on here, notably these functions. So there's a couple different ways that I can do this, and I'm just going to do it this way to show you what that looks like. All right, so okay. We can access and change the themes by calling the actual methods provided on the individual ticket items. That's not showing theme ticket. Select. Okay. Refresh. All right. Not sure why that's not working. Let's take it a different approach. We'll do theme.select dark light. Okay, there we go. I'll have to figure out why that's not working. So, and just to make it easier to be able to differentiate the two themes, I'll come back to my config and we're going to say we have a background white and a background black. Then on my class here, and then I'll update my Uno config. Okay, so comment that out. So in a similar fashion to as Vuetify, you'll have the ability to easily select and enable a theme. You'll have the ability to do some of the same cycle methods that will cycle through your different theme colors, and easily supports dynamic registration. So I can do something like theme.register, and we'll just say, call it contrast, and now this structure is still pending. Right now everything it follows the exact same structure every plugin does in terms of how you interact with the registry. We are planning on adding some kind of aliased methods that are more semantically correct depending upon the plugin that you're working with. So we're still early phases on this, but and we'll just say primary is equal to palette.md, and let's pick a color. I'll just say indigo 200, why not? Okay. And actually, so when I register this, it's going to return the ticket that we've created. So we're registering with the theme. We can also just as easily unregister, theme.unregister, contrast, and remove it from the registry. This is the same throughout all plugins. And so this gives you a lot of flexibility to be able to manage your themes in a dynamic manner, but also having the flexibility of not being tied to Vuetify's CSS utility nomenclature. And yeah. So, by the way, I know there's only like 11 people here, so if you have questions, feel free to ask in the chat, and I'll try to answer them. For now, what I'm going to do is we're going to move on to the next plugin. And interesting that this text on background isn't working. I would like to figure out that real quick. Okay. Oh, I'm missing an on background. Right? VO. Aha. So while Vuetify does this stuff for you automatically, and it will in the future, refactored using Vuetify 0, the baseline of that functionality is going to be very verbose, very configuration based. It's a matter of just putting in your values. And what we're trying to do is just abstract the responsibility from the user of having to manage how these colors get configured together and generated on the plugin side. And then if you need to, and I'm not really going to try to do this today, but you have the ability to set up custom adapters. So you could, instead of using our baseline version that works with SPA and SSR, maybe you have a custom situation that you need to put those values in a different spot. And basically we will just generate all of the values and tell you, hey, here are your values for your themes, and do with them whatever you want. So the next feature I'm going to go into is use permissions. This is a fun one. And in a similar fashion to all the other plugins, it will have the ability to use an adapter for if you want to use off-the-shelf libraries to manage your permissions. So castle.js is a popular one. I know that there are some SAS services that have their own structure for generating permissions, and the idea is that this will be able to just hook up to that, but it will also just work out of the box. So again, we've got some nice documentation here that you can easily see as you're working with it, what everything is, where you can get information on it, so you can quickly go to the documentation, as well as an example of how to set it up. Alright, so we're going to cheat here, and we'll just copy this. Oops. Alright, and just like that, we've now hooked up a permissions plugin. This is just a very basic role-based access control, but we can still interact with it in the same way that we do with other systems. So if I come back here to the console again, we've got our collection. Looks a little different than theme. Has a few less methods, but still maintains a collection, and we interact with it in the same way that we would a theme. So let's start by, alright, so permissions has, oops, a can function. So if, okay, and the, oh, interesting, that's not getting types. Okay, I'll have to work on that. So permission comes with a can function, very simple. The first field is the corresponding permission, target, admin, user, guest, whatever you have in your system. The action that you're checking if they can do, and then the subject of that action. So we set up a simple config for admin, so can read users. So we can say vif can admin read users. Now, typically in an application, you would probably have something like an auth store in Pina. I guess we could do that real quick, no harm. So just copy this. And set this up really quick. And we'll create a user function and alright, we'll do that, and then we'll just say and role. So we'll say is it admin that I have it set up as? Yeah, so admin. And then alright, so this is just a little makeshift login store. Let's see. Since this is a new, okay, so I'll just go ahead and import use auth store from our store auth. Oops. All right, and then we'll just create a button here. And make this easy. We'll add a logout as well. Okay, and now we can actively use this store. So we say auth.user.role, and so now we can't see it because we have a guest role logging in. So again, this is all very contrived. You know, there's lots of different setups that you can have, but the gist of it is you can hook up whatever you want to it. The logic's already taken care of. You just need to manage your application how you normally would. So there could be a bunch of different ways that you access and gain the role of the current user. You can also, use null coalescing operators to be able to generate defaults. And again, did I not save? Auth.logout. that. I'll have to log out, refresh. Log in, log out. Okay. So again, the idea is to make this as simple as possible to accommodate typical features that you're going to look for in an application, especially when developing components, which I'll do here in a minute. We've still got plenty of time. And I'll go ahead and stop for a second. Does anyone have any questions so far? Not a lot of chatter, which is fine. Okay, let's check out this DevTools Interactive. Okay, so another cool thing about Vuetify 0 is, now if you've worked with Vuetify and Vue DevTools, you know it could be a pain. Now it's not just Vuetify that runs into these issues. Any complex framework has the tendency to cause Vue DevTools to run very slow, not work very well. Making a concerted effort to improve that as well. There will be the option to have plugins automatically register in DevTools for easier access. However, we can still kind of view what's going on here. So we've got, again, our theme context object. We have our permissions context object. And you can view all this information here inside of the DevTools. And then we have our auth. All right, so let's pick a different one. Let's use Logger. So Logger is an example of a composable that you can opt into. If you choose to opt into it, you will have some advanced features and functionality and the ability to hook up a custom adapter. So if you use, like, I think we have Pinot and Winston as adapters. But if you decide to opt into this functionality, it will enable itself in other composables. And what does that mean? Well, if a composable like theme plugin or permissions plugin has a console log statement for some sort of information it's trying to provide to you, whether there's an error or something like, I don't know, like a duplicate registration or something, these will just work. We have a fallback, console implementation that's super simple, super fast. But if you choose to opt into something more, you'll get some additional functionality. And let's take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so I'll come back to my app. I'm going to bring in use Logger. Now I haven't created the plugin yet. So what's going to happen here? Info. Okay. So it puts out this information. Okay, this is cool. But once we bring in that actual plugin, we get some advanced functionality, including colors, and then again the ability to define an adapter. So you can see now that we have opted into the Logger plugin, we have some better looking logs that actually have color, and again you can opt into that, or excuse me, by opting into this, now you have the ability to, if let's say you want to use Pinot, you can hook up, we have a Pinot adapter, and you can just, actually I don't know if it's exported yet, so I'm not going to do that. But what it would look like, okay, so we've got our Pinot Logger adapter. And again, information regarding the type and whatever pertinent remarks or examples, something we're heavily working on to make it a much better DX while you're inside your application. And all I would do here would be to specify this logger adapter. Yeah, and it's probably going to complain because, yeah. And that's fine. It's not ready for that yet. But again, the idea is composables will have optional functionality that can turn on for better user experience based upon the plugins that you install. And if I, again, come in here and remove this, we can see we still get console logs, everything still works, but we lose, in this particular instance, the pretty colors. And then also, you can notice here that this error, we actually get a stack trace, whereas without it, we don't. Alright, so that's the logger. Let's go into something like okay, actually this is a good time. Now I want to go into some of the underlying functionality that is used to build these plugins and what it would look like to create a component that uses them. So let's bring in the locale plugin. If I hover over this, it should give me an example, so I can just pop in here. Oh, I don't have an example added. Look at that. That's garbage. Okay, so we'll just say create locale plugin. We have a messages entry, so we'll have en I used to have Copilot, and I guess it's disabled right now. Makes this a little bit easier. I don't know hello world in Spanish, so we'll just say hola world. Alright, and then I'm going to specify my default as en. Hola mundo, thank you. Okay, so this is like exactly the same. If you've worked with Vuetify, a lot of this should look pretty similar. It's just had the structure normalized a little bit, and everything is based off of the same underlying architecture, whereas in Vuetify, some things are based off of that underlying registration architecture, but not everything. And this has created mismatch in some areas and maintenance burdens in others. But this is very similar to the locale plugin that you would use in Vuetify. Now, if I come back over here to my app, again, I can pull in, use locale, and I could do something like locale.t hello world. And you can see here in the console, we get our nice little hello world here. And if I were to do something along the lines of locale.select, and we'll say we want to go to Spanish, just like that, everything works as expected. Now this is still using the same view provide and inject system that Vuetify does. Everything is based off of injectable context. The same thing that applies to being able to register themes on the fly. You could register locales on the fly, permissions, etc. Anything that's a plugin, you can modify these things at runtime, and it'll just work. Now let's go into, all right, I want to make a component. Alright, so let's see. And let's do, so one of the components in Beautify that utilizes groups is called selection control. Okay, so let's say selection control root, and then we will create a selection control item. Okay, and let's do this first as if we were just not using Beautify 0. Okay, so we have this main parent that we want to control the model. Now in Vue, you can do this in multiple different ways, but we're going to go for something that we can do that's reusable. So we'll just need a slot here, and okay, model, define our props. Go. Define our emits. And what you're seeing here, if you don't know, that this is just basic Vue macros. So we'll be able to reuse these whenever I convert this over to Beautify 0. So we've got update model value. Value, our value is unknown, and actually, since this is a selection control, we'll make this default array. Okay, and we'll add a watcher to the model that'll say that it will emit that value when changed. Let's see what's in here. Oh, let me just see that. Okay. Props. Yeah. So define model is just some semantic sugar. It's got information in here that explains more about it. It's set up to be able to make reactive variables easier to bind. You can still use just regular refs. It's kind of the same thing, but in this particular instance, in fact, I might be wrong. You might not even have to define these with the model. I'll have to double check. I could be wrong here, but let's just keep moving. All right, so we've got our slot model, and then we've got our control item. So let's say something like div input checkbox. I cannot type unknown, apparently. Hey, stop it. What are you chewing on? No. Don't chew on that. Okay. This is not. This is complaining. Alright, so we've got our input, we've got our label, we've got our control parent that we're going to use to propagate this model. So we'll do it like that. And I'll save this for a second, but we'll come back in and we're going to start fresh. So okay, so we've got our model, and then let's do value 1. Alright, so we've got those items in place. Let's do flex item center. Do that, give them a small gap. And again, so this is utilizing Uno CSS. I don't particularly use Tailwind, but you can use any CSS utility library that you want. It does not matter because all of the functionality of Utify 0 as a framework core is JavaScript. There are some plugins that generate CSS that is used, but it's very few, and it's controllable via an adapter. Okay, so now we've got this here. We've got our model value, and then let's see. I'm sure this is going to fail horribly. Yeah. So So let's see. I think what you would do here is why is this complaining? Oh, of course. Okay. And then if we come back to, let me pin this. Close that. Okay, so we've got that value, this model coming through. Now this is maybe a little different because typically if you were using, how do I word this? So let me just take a regular input. Alright, what you would do in Vue normally is this. You would bind the model to each one, and then Vue just figures out the rest. So I can okay. So because this is how you would normally achieve model model sharing in Vue. You have a model, you apply it as a model, excuse me, you have a ref model as you define in your script, you assign that with a V model, and then Vue figures out the rest. Now, what we're trying to do, though, is we want the ability to have a central place to control what models or how they're actually used, and then doing it in a component structure. So yeah, I know that's not going to work. So I'm kind of doing this on the fly. I've never I don't code like this. I don't build these default structures because I have Vuetify and Vuetify 0. But we're going to learn this together. Okay, so we've got our event type target value. So it's val.target. Okay. And then you would do something like if model.value.includes, we'll just say cost value, it's val.target value. If it includes the value, then we'll get rid of it. If it doesn't, we'll push it in. Okay, there we go. Hey, look at that, from scratch. All right, so this is kind of what it would look like. The control of being able to have a root element, so maybe we want to have some styling associated with it. It could be anything. We'll say BG primary PA3. And text on primary. Okay. So let's say that I want to do the same type of setup in using Vuetify 0 to manage the models. It would look something like this. So we import a selection. So everything is based off of a default selection composable. From that, we derive a group composable. From that, we also derive a single composable. This is, single is basically a radio selection. Group is a checkbox selection. Selection itself can be both. It's meant to be that as the baseline, and then we also extend further on things like for making steppers and carousels. We have a step composable which extends off of single. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in, we'll restart this. We're going to bring in our context, and we're going to let's create some props. So we'll say const. We'll add a default namespace. Okay, and then we will take that and we will say so this right here is what's called a trinity in Vuetify. What is this? Oh. Okay. Alright. Yeah, we're not worried about that. We'll just close this off. Get rid of the errors. Okay. So there's a couple ways you can do this. The way that I'm doing it right here is so that it's flexible, so that you could define a custom namespace. And what that means is that if you've ever think about the concept of like a nested form, so you've got, let's say you have 5 forms and then they all exist within a larger form, and you want that larger form to be able to have access and do something with those each individual namespaced contexts, but each of the forms itself is self-contained under whatever you specify. Another way that this could have been done is if you're needing to create a static. This could be useful for plugins. You can do so like this. And the only difference here is because the reason why I'm putting that as such, if I need to move these up here. Boop. Okay. I can't. What do I see? Oh, that's right. Const. Okay. So here I could import use selection control context from any other component and get access to what's provided. However, in this particular instance, I want to be able to have a dynamic namespace, so I don't need that first argument. So we're just going to have a provide. And this is the same provide that is in view. We just have a wrapper around it. And then we don't need to pass anything through the slot because we're already doing it through context now. And we need to define a model. Let's say model is defined. Okay. And now we're going to do a so one of the things about the baseline of Vuetify Zero composables is they are not reactive by default. They sometimes have reactive properties on them, but to maximize the performance in use cases, you may not always need the reactivity, so by default it's not enabled. So if we want to have the ability for our registry that we're creating, our selection registry, to sync with the model, we have to use something called use proxy model. Now we have this concept in Vuetify. It's called a proxy model. It's the same thing. So it's just, it has been kind of retooled to be specifically for interacting or syncing models, a view model with the model inside of our context. Now, in order for this to work, we have to enable events. Talk about that another time maybe. And we'll just say model value equals use proxy model. We give it the context. It could be any registry that's based off of selection, so selection, group, single, step, anything like that. And then we say the model that we want to sync it with. And we'll add a watcher on this. Actually, I don't think we need to add a watcher on that. We can just do this because this already handles that. Okay, so here's an example. We're defining props. This is a view macro. We're defining model. This is a view macro. We're creating a new context, which is basically equivalent of calling provide. With whatever we're providing in the context, and then inner components would inject. right? Same thing as this. We're just wrapping that functionality to be able to have a unified return. They're saying, hey, we want to create a new selection context. Here's the namespace we're giving it. We have events turned on. And actually, I'll show you what it does if you don't have events turned on, because it'll tell you. We're wanting to sync our model with the model of the context selection. And I'll show you what that is. Okay. Okay, so you can see here we're getting this attempted to register event listener, register ticket, but events are disabled. If we didn't have our logger plugin, this would still warn us. It would just be a regular string text. So an example of, additive composables. When some composables, my dog is eating a Christmas ornament. Whenever we enable those composables, it gives us the ability to do more, provide stack trace, provide color, etc. And if I look at this collection right here, actually it'll probably be better to look in here. If I look inside of this context, again, we can see this is a registry, same structure with just a couple of additional methods on it. But specifically, we have selected IDs, selected items, selected values. Now you can see that these are computed and reactive, but everything else is not. What the use proxy model does is it says, hey, it sets up some watchers and some listeners for if a value changes in the registry correlating to what's selected, it will properly update the model. And if the model changes externally, then it will update the internal registry. So we've got our selection control root here. We have, move this down here. We have created a new selection context. We're making it reactive. And then we're providing that selection context. So now we want to move over to the selection control item. All right, so we're going to import uSelection from at View-to-5 v0, and we're going to inject that parent context, and we'll just console log it for right now. We need to define some props, so we'll say define props. We have our value. We have our label. Okay. Now let's come back over here, and we're just going to turn on one of these. Value label, we can remove this and save. Okay, so alright, so it's complaining we need to enable event listeners in order to use proxy model. Okay, and now if we go into, let's see, what this is 0. Okay, yeah. So we come into our collection, put this down, come up here. Okay. So if we go into our collection, we can see that we have nothing registered with our map, even though we're using the parent. Well, all this is doing is just hooking into the context. We actually have to register with the parent. So what I'll say is, we'll say radio equals selection.register, and we're going to register with this value. Alright, so now we've got our radio registered, and we can see here now in our collection map that item just popped up. This is our newly registered item. So now the parent has knowledge of this child, that it exists. And now I can do things that will enable it to actually update this model, because right now if I click this, we're not getting anything. We're not getting any model changes at all. So I'll come in here and say at change toggle. Okay. Now value props that value, input type value change. What am I missing? Oh, not change. Click. Okay. No. It is at change. Let me look at something real quick. I think I'm missing one small thing. Ah, okay. I see. So I do think that I have to define the emits in the watcher. This may be a shortcoming on our behalf right now that I have to look into. So let's go ahead and define them. And update model value. And then we'll add a watcher. What am I missing here? So we've got our emits, update model value, define model, define props, create selection context, namespace events, proxy model. Oh, that's why. We'll work on that. All right, there we go. Okay. Progress. So, is the model the same as ref? Yes, I think I answered that already. Okay. So, let me do one last check to make sure I'm not. Oh, that's right, because I need to define. Okay, there's the root. There's the option. I'll close this. And, okay. I wonder if, let me just double check, because I did a release yesterday. What is at Utify? Am I crazy? Am I tripping? I'm not seeing it installed in here. Alright, okay, that's strange. Okay, not sure why this is not turning as an array. Maybe I didn't publish a release with the fix for that. So, anywho, let me see. So I did some work on this previously yesterday and tested it was working fine. I'm going to go ahead and copy that over to try to understand. This. And then copy over this. selection control root. Yes. That's annoying. No location find path. Okay. So what is going on here?
Royce. Sit.
Good boy. Okay. So why is this not rendering? Look at the selection root, selection item. Oh, okay. I know why it's that. Okay, so because I made some changes to this. So in this particular instance, we actually have to, I'm passing through everything through a slot. So I just need to grab that real quick. And to toggle. Value as well. We'll assign our ID. 4 equals ID. Interesting. Okay. We'll make it a string, buddy. Let's say ID. It's gonna, I guess it's going to complain about that too. Okay. And then we'll just duplicate that. Okay. Still giving me crap about the model not being an array. Alright, well that's kind of unfortunate. But that is what a live demo is. So let me check one more thing. I did have a bin saved. Maybe I'm missing something small. Alright, we'll just update these real quick. Okay. I guess I didn't release the fix. I'll have to release the fix. Alright, but the idea now is let's just pretend, here, we'll make this a single instead of multiple so that it doesn't look so weird. Okay, so now, of course it's going to do this. Alright, I gotta release an update, so it's having issues. But essentially, what's supposed to happen is that these values are, that these two components are controlling the state for you to be able to pull from the slot and then customize to your liking, however you want it to look. And you know what? I could just, let me do a release right now. It only takes a few seconds. And we've got about 20 minutes left. Okay. Yep. I had a proxy model fix, and that'll take a second to load up, and then this will work. Sorry about that. I thought that I made that release already. While we're waiting, any questions? Any curiosities? Any functionality that you're like, hey, I'd like to be able to, do something like this, or how would I do something like this in Beautify Zero? Oh my goodness gracious. Hold on one second. Something's happening with my network, and this release isn't pushing. Alright, let's see if that is going to go. Alright, that should just take a minute or two. Oh, I guess chat's not working. It says error. That's annoying. Wonder why that's doing that. Pop-up chat. Please sign into your channel to continue using Studio. That's super annoying. I just get logged out like mid out account. Okay, I'm having to like re-authenticate, so just 1 second. Okay. Now let's go back. Am I no longer live? Did this thing just die? All right, am I back? Can you guys hear me? Okay, well that's good. At least I could see. It wasn't letting me interact with chat or anything like that. It was telling me no. So, all right, let's see. Did this release kick off without a hitch? All right, let's try to update. 9. Alright. Hey! It helps whenever you push the bug fixes. Alright, so kind of what you're looking at here is an example of what we would do in Beautify called the selection control. So if I come to Beautify really quick, and we've got a selection control group. All right, if we break this component down, don't worry about all these props. We're going to see a couple things. One, I'm going to see this model proxy, which is similar in name to what we're doing in Beautify 0. We're providing information, context, on a specific namespace, or here it's called a symbol. And then V selection control. And then if we come into V selection control, essentially all that it is doing is injecting the context of the group and then a bunch of other stuff. Doesn't really matter. But the point is, the baseline of what we're trying to do is exactly the same. We've just now broken it down into more reusable steps. So now, instead of being in charge of the styling, Beautify 0 is just going to allow you to let us handle the functionality aspect of maintaining these structures without you having to do so. Now I'm curious, I wonder if this is, I don't need to do this because I have define model. I'm pretty sure. No? Interesting. I guess maybe I have a misunderstanding about, I thought define model did that semantic sugar. I guess I have to look into that. But yeah, that's basically kind of an overview of Beautify 0, very rough overview of Beautify 0. The idea again is trying to, it's hard to repair a missile in flight, and Beautify is very large, and while we have a set of design principles that we follow for all of our features, they don't all follow it to the letter, and what that's created is some fragmentation in our internal API and how we're building stuff. Beautify 0 is meant to homogenize that, to normalize the these data structures that we use to manage the component state, and specifically starting with the ability to create and use only the things that you specifically want to use for your framework. So imagine this in the future. So right now Beautify has locale and breakpoints and dates. And maybe you don't use those, but they're still bootstrapped into the application. There's still some sort of performance cost associated with it. So the idea going forward, once refactored, is that the plugins that are used in Beautify will be optional, in the same sense that they're optional in Beautify 0, and that adding certain composables can augment the functionality of others, like I displayed with the logger plugin. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at, looking to start doing some refactoring in Beautify, probably the beginning of next year, after we release version 4.0, and we'll continue hammering on it until we get it right, and hopefully this provides a good foundation and base for an unstyled future. There is one more aspect to this, named Beautify Paper, which I didn't talk about today, and the best way to think about Beautify Paper is as if you've worked with the Beautify defaults system, and where you're able to designate a component or a nested component and apply certain properties to that particular component. Beautify Paper is a prop-based approach to unstyled components as opposed to a CSS approach. And the idea is we'll have Vuetify 0 as the foundational base that provides functionality that Vuetify Paper uses, but that Vuetify ultimately, with its defaults system, then provides all of the styling variables to all components from the root, as opposed to having kind of a baked-in material design initial look. It will be a lot more flexible. So we're coming at the end of time here. I haven't seen any questions, and there's like 4 people left, so I'll wait a second and see if anybody has anything to ask, and otherwise we'll go ahead and close up shop. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for showing up. Hopefully we'll make this a little cleaner in the future. Trying to figure out the best way to stream. Doing it on Discord means we don't get a recording, and so today try to experiment with streaming through YouTube. So we will be back again next month. Not sure what we're going to talk about with our webinar, but if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out on Discord, community.vuetifyjs.com.